I save more than 60% of my six-figure income every single month, and some months it goes up to almost 70%. This is all from my primary source of income here in Canada, my full-time day job. And no, I don't live super frugally and save every single penny. And so in this video, I'd like to walk you through how so that you too can increase your savings percentage. It took me a couple of years to adopt this mindset, and spoiler alert, it's not easy to adopt this mindset, otherwise everyone would be rich. But I'm certain if I can do it, you can too. Before we get into it though, few things to call out so that it clears the air. Number one, I live in downtown Toronto and I pay a pretty steep rent to live here as shown in my previous video. Check it out when you get the time. Two, I don't pinch pennies and sacrifice on things that I love doing and eating. Yeah, that's right, I love eating and trying new food places. Three, all this is keeping in mind that I started literally from scratch when I moved to Canada. So it doesn't involve taking financial help from my family or whatever, completely relying on my own income. Now that we got those out of the way, let's talk about the 5 fundamental principles of saving more money. So fundamental that you actually enjoy the process.
The fundamentals of business. Because you're mental, if you don't have a good time, you have to enjoy it.
The fun, isn't it?
Fundamental.
Oh, right.
Get out.
Also, it's super important that you follow these principles in this order, otherwise you'll fall short. You'll see why in just a bit. Number 1, drastically reduce your expenses and spending. Let me be abundantly clear. This does not mean you cut down spending on all fronts. I mean, my wife and I spoke about the concept of living a rich life in the previous video. But what I do mean is cutting down your expenses mercilessly on things that you don't really need. A good portion of things that most people buy are either luxuries or really downright unnecessary. So it's important to identify what category each expense falls in. For instance, there are basics, necessities, treats, nice to haves, luxuries, splurges, etc. I would highly recommend doing this activity once where you take a pull of your last 3 to 6 months of your expenses to see what you've been spending money on and categorizing them into these buckets. Once you have a bird's eye view of everything, you can decide on which areas to mercilessly cut down on, and that's going to go a long way. Let me tell you a personal story of how I conquered this. This actually goes back a couple of years when I was in India. I had quit my high-paying corporate job at the end of 2019 to focus on my startup that was showing traction and promise. This startup was completely bootstrapped, and so apart from me having invested my own money into this, I wasn't drawing a salary from the company, just like how most startups operate. But around April or May of 2020, COVID hit us properly, and then it turned out to be a much bigger challenge. There was rent to pay, employees to pay, bills to pay, and all I had to fall back on were my savings. I had savings that could last me about 6 months or so. And every penny that the startup was making was invested back into the startup itself, which really wasn't very significant. I did what any normal person would do in a situation like this. I started freaking the fuck out. That's when I decided to really rethink my plan for the year and do some serious number crunching, just like what I mentioned earlier. When I did the math, I realized that I could bring down my expenses drastically without seriously affecting my existing lifestyle. And so that's exactly what I did. And automatically, my 6-month savings became a 14-month savings. This tough phase of my life completely changed the way I spent my money. I realized that I was spending on a whole lot of things just because I could. I was spending on getting some of the best shoes out there, getting the best watches, gadgets, etc. Which is so ironic because I didn't even get a chance to wear any of them properly for the next year or two, considering it was 2020, the pandemic and whatnot. I can assure you that you too have such areas in your life that you can stop spending on and drastically bring down your expenses. Work on identifying those areas. This bit will form the bedrock for your savings and for your life, which will help you with fundamental number 2, avoiding lifestyle creep or hedonic adaptation. For people who don't know what that is, let me give you a simple example to explain this concept. Let's say you're earning $4,000 per month and your monthly expenses is around $3,500, which includes your rent of say $2,500 and about $1,000 for general expenses and provisions. This means you have a monthly savings of about $500. Let's assume the next year your monthly salary increases to $5,000. Now in all ideal sense, your expenses and rent should stay the same with the savings increasing. But that's not what usually ends up happening. We have this inner narrative or conscience that tells us that now we're doing better in life, we should be able to afford better things in life. And so we move to a better place to live and also start buying more things that we may need, some that we don't, and some that we definitely shouldn't buy.
And bought myself a plasma TV. Check it out. A lot of people in the room, you need more space. Voila, right into the wall. Wow.
This is lifestyle creep, where your lifestyle goes up along with your salary, which in turn means no real change in your savings. Again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have or experience nice things. progression and improving your lifestyle are all good things. But there's a big difference between necessities and frills or luxuries, like I mentioned earlier. And this is why it's super important to follow these principles in this order. If you reduce your expenses and draw the line early and keep that sustainable in the long run, then the amount of money you have left over shoots up drastically. But what do you do with all this money? That's where fundamental number 3 comes in: saving. You can have all the money left over at the end of the month, but if you don't have a system to handle this money, then there's a good chance you'll slip up and use the money to buy some shit you don't need. And so inculcating the habit of saving and putting it away in the right account is super important. If you're wondering what kind of account, then I would recommend checking out my video on the optimal order of investment accounts when you get the time. A bonus tip here is to save, or as the rich call it, pay yourself as soon as your salary gets credited. It makes things so much easier on you, and you already know that you've hit your savings goal for the month even before the month has properly started. Once you instill this habit of saving, it's going to be really hard for you to not save. Now let's talk about the next fundamental, which in my eyes is the most important out of the lot: increasing your income and earning potential. Most folks get either really comfortable or complacent with the work that they're doing, and they assume that that's the norm. I mean, that's what most people are doing, so it's easy for us to adopt the herd mentality. But if you don't break free of that thinking, it could potentially lead to mediocrity. Again, if you're leading the life you want and you're achieving your goals, then great, that's all that matters. But if you're following the previous principles I mentioned and you still are finding it hard to save, then increasing your income or earning potential will make a massive difference. Remember, there's a limit to how much you can save, but there's really no limit to how much you can earn. There are numerous ways you can do this. You could start working as a freelancer, intern somewhere to grow later in that field, work on your side hustle, take up courses or certifications, or get an MBA if that's going to help you grow. This one principle will have the biggest impact on your savings out of all of them. Although it's still important for you to follow these principles in the same order. I mean, there's no point in earning more if you also start spending more, right? The previous 4 form the foundation to saving more money. Without getting these under control, it's going to be quite difficult to get into the final principle, in my opinion. And this principle involves your money making you more money. And of course, that is investing. Now, investing of course can be tricky, but there's some very easy tactics that you can use even if you're new to investing or if you're risk averse. But it's important to figure out ways to make your money grow instead of just leaving it in the bank account, especially with how recession just reduces the value of your money. The simplest and safest approach would be to put your money in a high interest savings account or the 𝗔𝗍. The next best option would be a low cost index fund or ETF. And if you have a bigger risk tolerance, then consider looking at some more aggressive stocks or ETFs, especially early on in your life. Do some reading around these and you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about. There's a whole lot one can do with investing, and I'm hoping some of my future videos could help you with making some of those decisions. I have a video releasing very soon where I speak about how I was able to invest more than $25,000 in the market in my first year here in Toronto. If you'd like to check it out and take some tips, then consider subscribing. Yeah, so these are the 5 principles I personally followed to get here that helps me save more than 60% of my income. Like I said earlier, it took me some time to get here, a whole lot of unlearning and relearning. And I'm hoping this video gets you thinking and ultimately gets you to your end goal you have in mind. Hit that like button to show your support. Also, here's a video I dropped recently talking about the order of investing your money and the ideal approach to making your money grow. This video would give you some super valuable tips and direction regarding investing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on this one.